Welcome back to another episode of the New Levels Coaching Podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by my good friend and work colleague, Dr. Matt Long, for a very special episode, something a bit different this week. We've even prepared notes. We are that prepared. Yes. So we are the endurance podcast that brings lots of inspiration and education to the endurance world, so you can literally go away and run with it. But this week, we're going to focus on the Olympic Games. We're going to look forward to what is to come in Paris 2024. But before we do, we're going to look back. So I've asked Matt, who is a bit of a historian of the sport and a statistician, and he's come up with these notes, which is brilliant. And we are going to refer to them as we go so that we don't miss anything. We've got all the names, the runners and riders, as they say, for Team GB, and we're going to look forward to see what is to come, particularly track and field, endurance-wise, and also going to touch on the triathlon, as well as some other areas, such as the marathon as well. Lots of excitement to come. We will backtrack first, and I'm going to ask Matt for some of his favourite moments. But before I do, Matt, I always kick us off now with a question to you, and I don't think you've been part of the podcast since I've added this little addition in there. I am going to ask you for a coaching or a personal positive to kick off our podcast.
Personal positive, I'm after a short period of having a hamstring tendinopathy. I'm back running just recreationally about 40 miles a week. Did a fell race last weekend, and I'm running up in the Staffordshire Moorlands area tonight, a little trail race.
Nice. That was where I was commentating a couple of weeks ago over by the Roaches, that area.
Yeah,
Jamie did a race up there, not far from there.
Not too far from there, yes.
Well, best of luck. It's good to have you back on the road, and it's good to have you back in the podcast studio as well. My positive from the week, I guess, has been that I got to go home just yesterday for different reasons. I was up there for a family funeral, but every sad occasion brings some positives as well. I got to see a lot of my family, a lot of my friends, as well as my best mate's little one's birthday. So lots of positives to share with the family, and looking forward to this episode in particular. So that I'm not going with a coaching positive this week. I'm going with a family positive, because it's nice to break the coaching positives up.
Absolutely.
So where do we start? Well, we're going to start off by backtracking, Matt. We're going to go back in history, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Olympic Games. And I'm going to ask you for some of your favourite moments. So I'm going to ask you for one, then I'll add one in, then I'll come back to you, and we'll go vice versa. And we'll give 2 to 3 standout moments in history from the Olympic Games that really make it stand out. Now, I think your history is going to be a lot better than mine. It's certainly going to be a lot longer than mine. Where would you like to kick us off at?
Well, I guess for me, being born in 1971, being 53 years of age now.
You don't look a day over 40, Matt.
The earliest memories I have were the Moscow Olympics, and we've spoken on previous podcasts about the co-ovet rivalry, which it became Moscow in 1980, became the co-ovet games. There was all the politics around the Thatcher area, the boycott. And then, of course, I suppose in 1984, the Los Angeles Olympics, which were also boycotted by the Eastern Bloc and large sections or large countries around the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet Union. I guess for me, that was a real spectacle, because it was the first really, truly commercialized games in the way that perhaps Montreal in 1976, Moscow 1980 hadn't been. I remember a jetpack man flying into the stadium for the opening ceremony, the sheer kind of razzmatazz of watching people like Carl Lewis. We had our own Daley Thompson, wonderful program about Daley Thompson on the TV.
There was, yeah.
The other week, we still had we still had Ovet, we had the emergence of Steve Cram, people like that. Charlie Spedding for me in the marathon, John Tracy of Ireland, Mike McLeod, friend of yours as well. All of those people were medaling. Tessa Sanderson in the field particularly. Those were my early memories. And I think it's important to remember that the World Championships in athletics didn't come around till 1983. So there really was this sense every 4 years there was a major track and field spectacle. We only had the World Championships in Helsinki in 83, then it was Rome in 87. So for many of the younger listeners to this podcast, World Championships are every 2 years. We never had that in when I was growing up. So athletes really, I think the great Steve Ovett, one of my heroes, once said, only one person in athletics can get it right every 4 years. Everybody else is wrong. Very harsh thing to say, but that was the culture back then.
Amazing. I love how you paint that picture, Matt, because I have certain memories of those games, but obviously I wasn't alive when they were live. But I'm glad you've brought that one up, in particular Los Angeles, because I have a bit of a personal connection with that. Mike McLeod got a bronze medal there. Let's set the scene for that. So Mike finished third in the 10,000 meters, and by the time he'd flown home back to the UK, he was actually promoted up to silver because somebody had tested
Varnio?
positive.
I think it was Marty Varnio, the Finnish athlete.
It was, and you know, Mike has got still to this day, 2 Olympic medals from the same event at the same game. So he's got the bronze still in his possession, and he's got the silver, which is quite unique. He must be one of the very few athletes that's happened to where he's actually holds and possesses 2 medals from the same games from the same event, which is absolutely fascinating. Mike, I trained with his son Ryan here at Loughborough, so like I say, the personal connections there. And I invited Mike to one of our club presentation nights, actually, when I was at Darton Harriers, and he did a talk, and he brought the medals, and it was just brilliant. But you paint that picture so well of, you know, how it was starting to become a bit more commercialised. It was, I guess, athletics was starting to take centre stage. It always has been, for me, the pinnacle of the Olympic Games, the one that everybody wants to watch. But it's nice to hear your reflections of those earlier memories, because mine really start a little bit later than that, I guess. And the one for me that I remember well, I obviously know of all your Tessa Sandersons, your Daley Thompsons, those sort of people who stayed in the sport, and Crammy in particular, who was around for a number of years after that. But Linford Christie was my first
Barcelona,
memory.
92, yeah.
So young at that point I am, but you're starting to realise, everyone's talking about this Linford Christie. And then by the time 1996 comes round, which I believe Atlanta, 96, I'm a little bit older. I start to understand things more. But as a sports person, I was really excited. But what I remember most is I had to get up during the middle of the night to watch Linford Christie. But that was the sort of thing you did. It was blockbuster. It really was. I got up, and my brother and sister, they weren't interested. But my mum and dad were like, no, gonna get you up. We're gonna watch Linford. And of course, he false starts.
Yes.
He false starts.
So that was Atlanta, wasn't it?
Atlanta. So I remember getting up early hours. And I think, if my memory served me right, Matt, I think he false started twice, because that was the rules then. It was one person has to false start twice, and he did.
That's correct.
And I remember my dad saying to me, but he's always so good. We have this saying about Linford Christie going on the B of the bang.
The B of the bang.
The B of the bang, but he's gone too fast this time. So my first memory was, I guess, a little bit... not a negative one, but I remember being devastated for him.
Absolutely.
Devastated that I got up, but I still had that excitement of getting up for something in the middle of the night, which was really exciting. I guess that set the scene for me as a sports fan, because then I'm a big boxing fan, as you are, and a lot happens in America. So it became the norm to do that.
Yes.
And now, as I go into the trail and ultra world, I've started crewing through the night for people. And I made a joke to Gemma. I said, well, I've been doing this from a young age, because I've been getting up through the night watching athletics. So the continuum, that's where my journey started in the Olympics, and it's obviously since continued.
It's interesting as well how you mentioned Atlanta. For me, as you know, some of the listeners will know by now, I'm a big collector of athletics memorabilia. And I remember the thing that stood out for the track and field in Atlanta for me in 96 was Michael Johnson's golden spikes.
Oh, my word, of
course. And everybody
course.
wanted a pair of golden spikes. And I think I once saw them. I think it was in Birmingham at one of the Birmingham Diamond Leagues. They were in a kind of a little display cabinet, and I remember they really brought back those memories.
Yeah, of course. And we went to the Lausanne Olympic Museum on one of our runner retreats last year when we went to Morzine, and they had those sort of things in there, the golden spikes and, all the replicas of certain things, and it really brought back some good memories. And you thought, God, my first thought was, my word, that was 1996. I couldn't believe it. It didn't seem that long ago. No, but that was a standout moment. So,
and it's interesting as well how some of the Olympics become a cultural reference point. 92, you mentioned Barcelona.
Yeah.
I can hear in my head now the Freddie Mercury song Barcelona. Do you remember that?
Of course,
they played it.
And, I won't sing.
Yeah, and I think it was a year after he sadly passed. But that song was iconic, and the backdrop to the diving board, you could see the hills of Barcelona.
Of course.
And just bringing it back, what's that, 32 years ago? I can see it and hear it now.
And what's fascinating, when we went to Barcelona, we went to see those diving boards in the hills. It was a stadium set up high, isn't it, out of the city? But obviously a good friend of mine, Chris Thompson, got his silver medal at the Europeans in Barcelona.
2010, wasn't it? Behind Mo Farah, was it?
It was indeed. So again, that personal connection and how history it doesn't repeat itself, but these moments happen in very similar places that have very historic backdrops, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah. And this one feels a strange one to me because it's only 3 years since I never know whether to call it Tokyo 2020 or Tokyo 2021.
Of course.
It's come around really quickly, hasn't it?
It has indeed, yeah. It was 2021, of course, because of the COVID pandemic. It got delayed a year, and it was the only one, I believe, that's been out of sync since the war. Even the ones that were boycotted, obviously still went ahead. So that brought us to kind of 96, and then we get to, I guess, two standout moments for me in particular, and I'll ask you for as we get into the millennium, and there's lots to remember about the millennium and the millennium bug and those sort of things. But a couple of things from 2000 and 2004, I'm going to go with girl power here, because the things that stand out to me were Cathy Freeman.
Absolutely.
2000, the speed suits.
Absolutely. You're a commentator. You're a very well-established commentator. You've done work for the BBC. I remember I had the privilege of doing a little bit of stadium commentary with the girl that got the bronze medal that day, Catherine Merry.
Catherine Merry, of course.
And it was just, I think Donna Fraser was fourth. It was a great final. But again,
Fraser,
it was this kind of idea that the Olympics and the races stand for more than just athletics.
Absolutely.
They're a political symbol. Cathy Freeman, Aborigine and diversity and discrimination, and she ran in that kind of, was it green and yellow Australian jumpsuit. And I just remember the feeling when I watched that race, that the look of relief on her face. She didn't look pleased to win.
No, she was carrying the nation's hopes on her shoulders, wasn't she?
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me a little bit when in 2012, when I felt like Jess Ennis had the same pressure going into the London Games. But I remember seeing Cathy Freeman, and it was like a symbol almost. I think did she light the flame as well? Did she?
I believe so.
Or she was flag bearer. She had a lot of pressure, didn't she, on her shoulders going into that Games, and she delivered. And I think there's a message there for our listeners. We always try and relate it back to you at home who are tuning in. How can you apply this to your own running? How can you apply this to your own performance? Well, think about the pressure there on that young woman's shoulders as she's going into Olympic Games. We sometimes beat ourselves up with pressure, but if you soak that pressure up and you remember your why and you go back to why you're doing it, and you're doing it for the right reasons. And sometimes some of the sports psychologists we work with say, when you're running for more than just yourself, it's often when you get the best performances. And she was almost running for the whole nation, and particularly the culture that she represented.
Absolutely.
So that was 2000. And then my other girl power moment comes from one of our homegrown talents, Dame Kelly Holmes in 2004.
Yes.
Yeah, Athens. She'd never got it right. She had, I think a lot of people forget, she did have world medals, Kelly Holmes. She had delivered, she'd got us world medals, but she'd not quite cracked it. And she went into those games as I guess, not a standout favourite, because we had Maria Matola, her training partner, in the same event.
She'd won the bronze in the 800 in Atlanta that you've just alluded to 4 years before.
Yeah. So she goes in, and we know she's got a chance, but it's that energy of once you do one thing, can you repeat the next? And to come away with 2 gold medals, absolutely incredible.
And again, the thing that stands out for me about that is there was this great craze for running negative splits after, because she started at the back and moved through. And I know many of our listeners will be more endurance-based than middle distance, but that was a great thing that caught on. Also, do you remember that we laugh now because sports science moves on so quickly, but there was the thing about the magic ice bath. She always, every round she said, I'm going in my bathtub, and it was like a bin. And she'd just get in it with ice. And everybody that I knew, a club athlete, wanted one of these bins, or they were tipping ice into their bin. And, there's a separate debate as to ice baths. But I just remember it had that wider cultural appeal on all runners.
Well, let's go there with ice baths because they're still massive to this day. I mean, you see these ice pods now that people are in, and I do think both Kelly and Paula Radcliffe kind of set the trend at that time for ice baths. You know, they were adamant that these are the things that are going to help you to train harder and to recover. I guess the big thing here that I want to get across to our listeners is that the research is mixed on ice baths. They clearly work, as in they have that response where they help to reduce the inflammation. And the research points to what we call subsequent performance. So in Kelly's case here, in the middle of a championships, it's really important for the body to recover so that you can perform again. So you've got to recover as well as you can between the rounds. She was doing rounds in the 800. She'll have had a heat, a semi and a final,
yes,
I believe. And then she's got a heat and a final in the 15, if not a heat, a semi-final. I can't remember the structure back then. So a lot of races to run.
Yeah.
And she's got to go through those rounds and recover. But ice baths also can then potentially blunt the adaptations you're looking to get from a training block. So when you're in a hard training block, you want to naturally recover so that you get those nice training adaptations so that you become stronger. And if you start doing everything you can to recover better, then you're sometimes blunting those adaptations. That's what the literature says.
Of course.
I think it's personal preference, but what is apparent, Matt, you highlight it, everybody was jumping on it because I remember even as a youngster thinking, right, I need to be in ice baths.
Yes.
And that's where Gemma and I eventually met, was in the ice baths in Loughborough. And
I'm glad I brought that up. That wasn't scripted for anybody.
But it shows how that, I came to university in 2005, met Gemma in 2006, but it was the craze. Everybody was going, I need to go in the ice baths. Kelly Holmes does it.
Absolutely,
so really, really did set a trend. Anything stand out from you from that 2000 to kind of before we get to 2012? So 2000, 2004, 2008. Any other memories?
I'd have to go with Dame Kelly. On that 2004 games. Remember, I did some work with an athlete you'll be familiar with, Ricky Sues.
Yes,
he ran in the 800 in 2004, and he was saying, I remember him once saying he ran really well in the heats, didn't he? I think he got to the semi.
He did,
but he just said by the time he'd got to the semi, he just couldn't recover, and that kind of reaffirms the kind of ice bath debate for me, how you recover. And
if I remember rightly, Ricky was really young when he went to 2004.
Yes.
I think he was still only sort of 19, 20 in his first couple of years at Loughborough University, coached at the time by the late great George Gandy. Went on to marry Lisa Dabrisky, who I'll talk about in just a second. Sure. But a real talent Ricky was. I still believe in terms of aesthetics and movement, Ricky Sue's the best athlete I ever seen on a track at Loughborough, and I stand by that. I've seen a lot come through Loughborough. He's right up there. Jake Whiteman is also highly up there. James West from a male perspective. Laura Muir from a female perspective. I think she moves brilliantly. Particularly, I'm looking at these middle distance athletes.
Yes.
But Ricky was just a dream to watch. She really was, and it was a shame he didn't go on and fulfill. I think he'd be first to say he didn't fulfill his potential, but he's still involved in the sport now, and he's still working with teams in the sport, which is great to see.
Good.
So Ricky Sue's blast from the past, but a good friend, which is great.
Yeah. So
I'm going to jump to 2012 then, the big one. The year that everybody was, I guess, tuned in for. And there's some great memories from 2012. Obviously, Super Saturday stands out for a lot of people, but I'm going to go with a bit of a personal connection here as well. Unfortunately for myself and Gemma at the time, Gemma had been diagnosed that year in the July. She was living with and going through cancer treatment. So a lot of our Olympic story was actually spent in the hospital, but the positive behind that, it gave us a lot of things to watch. Every day you could tune in and look at something that was going on. But what was really special about it, for me in particular, and I know for Gemma, and it meant a lot, was we had friends who were competing. So Ross Murray made the semi-final of the 1500 metres, now a coach at New Levels Coaching. And just seeing Ross on the track and giving Gemma shout-outs during the games was just incredible. I gave up my tickets for Ross's heat because I felt bad. Gemma and I had tickets for the heats that night. So I gave them to my parents to go down with Gemma's parents instead because I wanted to watch it with Gemma in the hospital. But I did manage to keep my tickets for the night Andrew Asagi made the final of the men's 800 metres.
Oh, that must be still the greatest ever 800 metres. Was it 140.9? I think that
David Rudisha, yeah. So I wasn't in the stadium for the final. I was in the stadium for the semi. So I saw Andrew qualify for that brilliant final, which you described.
And I think I was going to say he was last, but that doesn't seem the right thing to say. But I think he came 8th, and he ran something ridiculous like 143.8. And I remember him walking off the track and shaking his head as if to say, I should be perhaps Olympic champion with that time,
What's just happened,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean...
And before shoe technology as well, so super fast. Funny story for you, Matt. I was working in a school in Teddington, and one of the kids... Andrew came in to do a bit of an inspirational talk and became friendly with, I certainly knew some of the kids who worked in or were in the behavioural unit there. And one of the kids followed him on social media and was like his biggest fan. But then after the Olympic final, the kid messaged him afterwards saying, ha, you came last.
That's a little bit harsh.
But he just said it just kind of made him chuckle and resonated because it was kind of a backhanded compliment, from that kid. It shows how kids don't always want to pay compliments.
Yeah.
But again, let's get to our audience here. Sometimes when people come in at the back of a race, and I always refer to them as our final finisher of the day when I'm doing the commentary.
Yes.
Let's support our final finisher of the day. I don't like the word last because you're beating everybody who isn't there. And you're beating everyone who's not getting off the sofa. You're beating everyone who's not putting those running shoes on. You're beating everybody who's not getting to that start line. And you're beating everybody also who started and not finished.
Yeah.
So you're not last.
Yeah.
You're just one of the other finishers. And I really want to point that out to people who maybe do find themselves towards the back end of a race. You are far superior than a lot of other people who aren't getting themselves to that start line. So don't ever feel like, that you are last of the pack.
Absolutely.
You're just part of a big community who are all doing the same thing and achieving the same thing. You're just doing it in different times. Yeah. And Andrew Asagi that day, despite being last, is a good example of that.
And remember, we also, these often, when you talk about the 2000s, they're often referred to as the wilderness years before the emergence of the Joss Kerrs and the Jake Whitemans. But we still had people to cheer for. One of your colleagues, Laura Waitman, I think, made the Olympic final that year.
She did.
Hannah England, I remember that because there was massive excitement. I just started as a coach at Birmingham University in 2012, and she went to the Olympics. And remember, she'd got a silver in the World Championships the year before. So there was massive expectation that she could potentially medal at London 2012. So, it was exciting times.
Was it Daegu she medalled at?
Daegu? I'm pretty sure it's Daegu, yeah.
So, and Hannah, fantastic tactical racer, excitement around those games. And the other female in that team was Lisa Dobrisky.
You mentioned,
And Lisa Dobrisky was partner to Ricky and very, very close friends of ours.
World Silver 2009, I think.
Another world silver medalist, I arguably world medalist and Olympic medalist. If you look at who's been caught cheating since, there's people who've beaten Lisa who've got the medals who've been caught cheating, but they weren't able to backdate it to those games because Lisa was fourth in Beijing.
Well,
really
again, we've come full circle. You started off with Mike McLeod in 1984. I mean, Mike McLeod, again, you said he's got a bronze and a silver. But the Italian Cova who won, again, at the time it wasn't illegal, but all sorts of allegations around blood doping. So again, that's the kind of sad underbelly of what we're talking about. There's been that constant theme, isn't there, across the generations of unethical or potentially illegal practices, And
I think, unfortunately, if you go back to the point you made right at the start, as the sport became more commercial, as the sponsors came in, more money becomes available. And at that time, it becomes, I guess, more of an opportunity for people to cheat because there's more money to be made from the sport. If there was no money to be made from the sport, I don't think you'd see as much cheating. It is a sad state of affairs. I'm sure there's been people caught already the last couple of weeks before the Olympics, which is good. We should celebrate that. We shouldn't see that as a negative that people are caught. We should see that as a positive. I'm a massive advocate for anti-doping catching athletes because I've always had an issue with it in our sport. Gemma will say, don't get me started or don't get Lewis started on the drugs conversation because I've seen it ruin people's lives who who have been affected by it in the other way. People like Lisa Zabriskie,
Yes.
who spoke out about it at that Olympic Games, and she was thrown under the bus, and it was so uncalled for. They said it was sour grapes, and she was right. 5 of that Olympic final have since tested positive, which is unbelievable to think 5 people in the same race. I think it's 5, it's maybe 4 or 5 have tested positive. But the reason I want to mention Lisa is because she gave Gemma a huge shout out on the TV whilst we were watching in the hospital. And I think, back to your point again, if we go full circle, it's more than sport. It was like Lisa had just ran in the Olympic Games, and in that moment where she could have said anything, she chose to recognise something external to sport.
Humanity,
But what sport had connected us in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that is what is brilliant about it. And they're the things that we should really celebrate as well. Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, that brings us all the way around to 2012, and we've mentioned already the 2020 and some brilliant moments from there. But I think, why don't we jump forward to present day? You're happy to get going,
notes
Matt?
time, is it?
Well, yeah, we can refer to these notes as we go.
Yeah, why not?
And thank you for producing these, Matt. They're great. What Matt and I did, just for a bit of context here, is we decided to look forward in particular to the endurance events. So we start the middle distance all the way up to the marathon, including some of the race walking, and also we'll touch on triathlon as well. But we wanted to give you an insight as our listeners, as our viewers, who to look out for when it comes to the Olympics this year. So what we've got here is Team GB representatives, a little bit of background about them, and we're going to touch on some more than others, but we're going to give you the names of people in the different events so you can keep an eye on them as you're going through that Olympic journey. So to kick us off, Matt, 800 metres, we've got Phoebe Gill, Keely Hodgkinson and Gemma Reekie. This is an unbelievable event, especially considering what happened in the 800 the other day in the Diamond League.
Oh, incredible. I mean, 154.6, I think, the new British record. Everybody is, I don't know, I mean, they're almost making Keely Hodgkinson a real favourite for the gold now. Do you think she can deliver? I mean, she can deliver, but do you think she'll do it?
I think she's demonstrated that she's got that tactical nous now, but I think the biggest factor is, as we know in the American team, there's a huge gap now with Afenmo not qualifying for that American team, which means that Keely now is probably the favourite in that event. However, there are people who are dangerous. I think Mora's still in there, so it's not. It's not a shoo-in, and Gemma Reekie wasn't far behind her either at that Diamond League.
155.6. Gemma's never quite done it. It's not criticism in the major championships. Do you think that new PB will give her the impetus to go for a medal? Do you think she's got a chance?
I think she just looks a bit more confident now. I think she's running with more confidence. I think confidence as well comes from the people around you, and they can gain confidence from how Keely runs. And you also seen in that race, which we'll go on to in a second, Georgia Bell had a good run. But within that as well, you look at the youngster in the team. I mean, they're all
17 years
still,
of age. Phoebe Gill, 157 in Belfast in May.
Incredible, absolutely incredible.
Is it just a learning experience for her though? I mean, should we have any expectation that she makes it out of a heat, or is she there just to learn? They always say you've got one good, one learning Olympics and one good Olympics. What's your thoughts?
My thought is that yes, you should learn as you go, obviously. You should be learning as you go. We shouldn't put the expectation on her. And I think what's good about Phoebe here is she's kind of the underdog within this team. Despite being as good as she is, she's not got the pressure that, say, somebody like, if I backtrack to the Manchester Commonwealth Games, Charlotte Moore, for example, who got a medal there, who was really young. She's not the standout in that team. So I think that might just elevate the pressure off her a little bit, and she might be able to run free. But cracking team. But if we go on to the men's side, we've got Max Bergin, Ben Patterson and Jake Whiteman. Obviously there's a little bit of a controversy around Jake's selection here, because if those of you who aren't familiar, at the trial there was a trip. Josh Kerr was involved in that. Josh Kerr didn't plan on running the 8, I believe. He was more lined up for the 15. But it did affect Elliot Giles, who wasn't selected and obviously was running well. Jake was excused from the trial because he's injured, but he has been selected. Now, do you think, Matt, he's been selected purely because he's ran quick over 800 this year, but his championship record speaks for itself, doesn't it?
I think both. You're talking about a world champion. I mean, that was a wonderful moment when he beat Ingebrigtsen in Oregon in 2022, 2 summers ago. But he's a 143 8.6 man over 800. I mean, this is somebody that I remember in the early part of Jake's career when he was heading to the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. He was an 8:15 man. So I think that it's a return into his roots in many ways.
Yeah, and if I remember rightly, he has medalled over 800 at different levels. Commonwealth stands out to me, where he's had good runs there. So I think we've got a real shot. I'm going to obviously go to Ben with being based here in Loughborough. Cracking run recently in Monaco, really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Second on the British all-time list to Lord Sebastian Coe.
To only Seb Coe, yeah. And Ben obviously knows how to get it done at Champs. He got that surprise medal last year, which, yes, it was a surprise to the athletics world, but I think a lot of people who knew him here at Loughborough knew he had a bit of a chance. He didn't feel like he'd ran as well as he could at the Commonwealth Games the year before.
But still got a bronze.
He got the bronze. So really good team there as well. Max Bergin, I don't think Max has ever got it right at a Champs. I'm going to be intrigued to see how he can vary the way he runs. He's a front runner. But
again, it can be a man for the big occasion. European under-18 gold. I know it's the junior, transition to the senior is different, but surely winning, an area championship like a European gold matters,
It does, and I think, again, similar to with Phoebe, that the pressure's off a little bit because he's got two big names ahead of him. He's got world medalists within there. So, again, he's going in there now thinking, instead of being the guy everyone's expecting things to happen from,
Absolutely.
It might just relieve that pressure on him. So let's go to the 1500 then. Laura Muir speaks for herself, unbelievable record in championships. She's been a real servant for the GB team. It feels like she's been around forever. I love Laura. I think she's great.
Yeah. A lot of people mistakenly say, she's past her best because she's been around for so long. But she ran a 3:53, didn't she? And lowered her own British record in Paris earlier this month.
Yeah, she went through a bit of a tricky patch. And then all of a sudden she comes out and runs that. And it's the fastest time she's ever ran. So she's obviously in good shape going into the Champs, which is brilliant. I think Georgia Bell, this is my kind of wild card. I think Georgia is learning on the job. I think she's getting better and better. She's coming into form. And when I watched her in that 800 the other day,
where she ran a 1:56,
she's got real finishing speed.
She has.
And I believe that indoors she got close, and I think she finished with a little bit too much in the tank. My personal reflection. I don't know. I'm not speaking for the athlete there. But I think Georgia Bell is somebody to watch. She's going to be
such a nice story, isn't it? Because she's had all that time out of the sport and then came back and works, I think, with Trevor Painter. That kind of stuff is a nice story, that comeback kid story.
Yeah, again, some inspiration for people at home. You don't always have to be involved in the sport. You can take some time away and come back, and sometimes that mental refreshment can help. Yeah. And then we've got Reve Walcott-Nolan. Again, has broken 4 minutes now, I believe, for the 1500, which at one point, again, back to your point earlier, that would have been good enough to medal in a 1500.
I was forgetting she did run in Tokyo 3 years ago. I didn't realise that. She seems to fly under the radar a lot.
She does, and she's a brilliant athlete. She's also good tactically, in a very strong team there. But if we could get those three girls in the final, that would be incredible, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's all of it. You want to cheer British Fest, don't you? As fans, it's a spectator sport. You want to see people in finals.
Definitely. It gives that interest, which leads us to the men, where we've had a lot of success over the last couple of years with the 1500. We've got the reigning world champion in there, Josh Kerr, who's absolutely flying. We've got George Mills in there, who has had a great season and is also going to go in the 5K as well. He's going to double up. And I believe, again, a great tactical racer when he gets it right and knows how to medal.
Who's your money on? I mean, you've got to look at Josh Kerr versus Inga Britson. I mean, it's great for me because I mentioned when we started the co-vet rivalry, and I know Inga Britson versus Kerr is not the same. It's Norway versus Britain, but it has got a bit of needle to it.
It has, and you know
but
what?
That's good for the sport.
It is good
it?
Because you've got in there Josh and Neil, so Neil Gourley, who's also Scottish, so there could be like a bit of rivalry within the GB team, but it seems again to have taken the pressure off the guys because they seem to get on well and they all seem to thrive off each other. And then you've got this thing about beating Inga Britson, and obviously with both Jake Whiteman and Josh Kerr doing it, both being Scottish, it seems to me like they do have a little bit of a mental edge over Jakob. However, I would say Jakob recently has looked really, really good. Really good. I just think, personally, I think Josh has more tools in his toolbox. I think he can win it in a number of different ways.
Yeah.
I think Jakob only really has one, which is to wind it up from the front, and he's got to be at the front. I think if Josh is ahead of him, I can't see Jakob getting past him.
Yeah.
So that's my prediction.
Want to pick your brains as a former British indoor champion, World Championship representative. In my day, going back to the Helsinki's, and the Moscow Olympic 1500 final, it was always a tactical race. This is going to be fast. It's going to be around about 3:29, 3:30, or perhaps even quicker. It's going to be fast, isn't it? Why is that now? Why is there this sudden shift into really fast 1500 finals?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I remember watching the 1500 metres at the Commonwealth Games thinking that was rapid. Matt Stonia from Loughborough here set a huge PB in the final.
Yeah.
And it isn't traditionally how it's been done. I think what's happened is people have realised that they're not all as fast as each other, so they can't sit and kick. So people are more suited to a faster race. I think also what we see, particularly with the likes of George Mills, is
3:30 man, yeah.
3:30 man, but very good over 5K. So actually, if he makes it harder, he's got a better chance because his strength might be better than other people's. But I do think a lot of our guys now, and a lot of the 1500 metre runners, come from more maybe of an endurance background. So in the Corvette era, you saw a lot of people doubling from 8 and 15. Now, I know they were strong, those guys as well, but they did possess a lot of speed. Whereas I feel like now, if you look at Jakob, Josh Kerr, George Mills, Gawley, and I could go along the list from other countries as well.
Yeah.
Your Geordie Beamishes, those type of people, they either have stepped up to like well over 3K indoors, 5K outdoors. Some have even tried the steeplechase. They come from more of a strength background.
Yeah.
So I feel like they really fancy themselves to run the kick out of people.
Yeah.
And maybe the only person who doesn't fall into that category is Jake Whiteman.
Yeah.
So if you're lined up against someone like Jake Whiteman, you might think, well, I need to make this fast because I want to take the kick out of his legs. That's my opinion. I don't know what yours is, if that's similar.
Yeah. I think George has had some bad luck over 1500. He gets knocked about a little bit, doesn't he? I think it happened last weekend in London.
That was a real shame,
But Neil Gawley, again, I think all three can make the final because Neil's made, I think, World Finals, Commonwealth Finals, European Finals.
Yeah, I agree. I think Neil's a really smart racer. I've seen him get dragged into a couple of races that he maybe shouldn't have again, usually when Jakob's in there. But I think if he keeps his cool, I still think he's got a chance. I really do. I think he's got a chance, outside shot of a medal. But yeah, we shall see. Let's go into the 5K then. So we've got George Mills in there, Paddy Deaver and Sam Atkin. We've mentioned George already. Paddy is a good friend of mine. Again, former Loughborough student, used to train with him here. He's done really well out in America, and he's set some cracking times over 5 and 10 this year.
13:04 for 5, yeah.
And in a really good place. I think the danger with Paddy is, when we know this, he struggles with the kick at the end, that speed, so he probably does need it to be fast. Sam Atkin, really quick, don't really know much about Sam. He didn't come back for the trial. He runs some super quick times in America, but he hasn't yet really delivered at the champs, so maybe this is the time to do it.
But it's his second Olympics, isn't it? And that's significant, given my point about one Olympics to learn, one to kind of... I remember Seb Coe saying that in 1980, and the difference between his 1980 experience and 84 experience. So Sam could do well. He's run 12:54.
Yes, yeah. He's quick. He's really
Absolutely.
quick. Yeah.
What about George as well? George has done 12:58. Do you see and he's a European silver medalist from Rome this year behind Ingebrigtsen. Do you see George's strength as 5 or 15?
Personally, I would have liked to see George just do the 5.
Just do the 5?
Yeah, that's my personal reflection on that. And I totally understand why he's done both, but my old coach, John Nuttall, great coach, the late, great John Nuttall, he used to always say to me when people doubled, master one event first before you double.
First, yeah.
You know, almost we've used that egg basket analogy in the past. Put all your eggs in one basket. Don't try and spread them.
Yeah.
I actually had that conversation with Jethro earlier on in the year about one of his trail athletes at the uphill trial. Does she do the uphill and the up and down? Yeah. And I said, personally, I would just do the one that you think you're better at. Yeah. Sometimes you think you're giving yourself more opportunity to do 2, but do you spread yourself a bit thin? Yeah. However, what I will say with George is he's super strong.
Strong.
he could potentially back them up. But I really like George Mills. I think he's very professional. If any kids out there looking at how to do it, have a look at George's story. He's the model professional. I really like him as a person. He was a student on what was the ACE program when I was a tutor on there, and I've got a lot of respect for George and how he's got to top. So that team in particular, George and Paddy, who I know personally. I don't know much about Sam, but I know he's ran super quick. So interesting across the board. What is interesting though, Matt, on the flip side is such a strong event for us in the past. The women's 5K is not a strong event for us this year. Why do we think that is? We haven't got anybody in the women's 5, I believe, unless we've missed that. But
I don't believe we have this year. No, it's more the 10,000 metres, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, so we've got the 10,000. We've got Megan Keith, who's been absolutely spectacular. I know Jess Judd has really struggled this year with a few health problems. So,
absolutely,
hope Jess is doing well, again, based here at Loughborough.
So Megan's got a bronze in Rome. Could that, translate into making a final, do you think, or would it be a straight final?
Straight final. I think the question for Megan is, can she get close to that, the African train at the front, which has often got a few Aussies in there and a few, I guess, Americans. So could we get a British athlete in that right up the top? Eilish is another one in there, but Eilish doesn't come in great form.
I was in the stadium when she got that Commonwealth gold medal 2 years ago in Birmingham. Yeah, she's not in great form. She had a DNF, didn't she? She didn't finish in Rome in the Europeans. What's your thoughts there?
Well, I think it's right to take her, because why not? If she's got the time and she meets the qualification standard, we criticise British athletics for not taking people. So if there's a space there and somebody like Eilish McColgan's name's there, then why not give her that opportunity? I guess it's watch this space. I wouldn't like to predict that one. If I was a gambling man, I wouldn't be putting money on it just because there's no form there. I'm a big believer in form. And similar with Paddy. Paddy does, well, so the opposite with Paddy. Paddy does bring a lot of form to the table.
I guess 6th in the Europeans.
Exactly that. But the question is, can he step up? So can he get in that mix? But I do think, back to your point about the 1500, I do think these 10Ks will be quick as well. And if they are quick, I think that sets Paddy up for a good race, because I think that's how he runs the best. Sure. So that's our 10Ks. Steeplechase is an interesting one, Matt. Who have we got in there?
We've got Lizzie Bird. She's a European bronze medalist as well. Came 9th in Tokyo 3 years ago. Amy Pratt as well. Also ran in Tokyo. She came 7th. So Lizzie Bird 9:07 PB. Amy Pratt 9:15. Again, I think really kind of at Commonwealth European level, they've got chances and have in some cases medalled. Little bit kind of a big ask to medal on a global stage though.
Yeah, it's a huge event with, again, the African presence, a lot of American success over the women's chase, in particular over the last few years. I've really liked Lizzie Bird's approach this year, though, later start, really targeting this, and I think she's coming into form at the right time, so that's good to see. Be interested to see how they both go, Amy and Lizzie in there. I guess on the men's side, really disappointing. I am going to say what I feel here. I think it's an absolute disgrace that we don't have a representative in the men's chase. There's been a lot surrounding that online. If you've not seen it, well, I'm sure if you follow any sort of athletics, you will have seen that we don't have a men's selection in there. I mean, without going too controversial, Matt, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a shame, like you say. We've seen people like Eilish given a chance. It is a spectator sport. We want to see people in British vests, so it's not my place to criticise selectors or selectors' policies. But it's a shame, because I think we want to see people in British vests and cheer them as fans. Yeah,
and this is it, isn't it? It's like it does come down to money at the end of the day, and back full circle. It's become this sport where we are relying on money, and I just think it's a real shame that somebody won't be there representing Britain because of money. So yeah, anyway, we won't go too much into that because we could do a whole podcast on that. But for those who did miss out on selection for the men's chase, we feel for you guys, in particular that very one person and who has had a lot of public backing as well. So yeah. On to the marathon. So not forgetting that we do have road events as well going on. And the women's side, they were selected a lot earlier than some of the other people, but Charlie Purdue, Rose Harvey and Callie Horga-Thackeray are going. And on the men's side, we've got Emil Caress, Mohammed and Phil Sessamon. Now, the brilliant thing for me here, Matt, is we have full teams in the marathon.
Yes.
We haven't had that for a long time. It shows we're in a good place, the endurance in GB at the minute.
So again, swings and roundabouts, what we appear to have lost in the chase is back in there with a marathon, which is good. Charlotte Purdue seems to have been around for donkey's years.
It's crazy, isn't it?
She still looks so youthful.
I've been on numerous trainer camps with Charlotte, and she just gets the job done, doesn't she? Yeah. And all these have hit that selection criteria, which we've just been talking about, and they have been selected, which is great. We want to see full teams. We would want to see Phil Norman in that chase, but we've got the likes of Phil Sessamon in here. Realistically, can they compete? I always believe there is a medal there for somebody in the marathon. There's always someone, Galen Rupp from America's snuck in there. We've had Italian medalists in the past. I think as Baldini maybe medalled or even won it in the past. We've had on the women's side more recently in Tokyo, again, an American medalist there. So there is chances for the non-Africans in the marathon.
I think Charlotte will want to do well because, unless I'm mistaken, in Oregon in the last World she DNF'd, which is always a possibility in an event like the marathon. Rose Harvey's is a nice story because she's a relatively late comer she's. I remember I interviewed her for, I think it was for Fast Running magazine, and I think the title was From Completer to Competer.
Nice.
She's gone from being a recreational runner and a lawyer and a sort of part-time triathlete to an elite Olympian.
Brilliant. It's a brilliant story. Yeah, it really is. I'm looking forward to watching them all. Emile Caresse, I think has got a real chance, coached by Renato Canova, but Mohammed was right on his tail in London, so that's going to be interesting.
I mean, how long ago? I mean, I can't remember the last time we got third and fourth in the London Marathon. Paul Evans back in '96, I think, got third. We're going right back into the 80s. I mentioned Charlie Spedding, winner in 84, Steve Jones. But, what they did in London and the times they ran, 2:6 for Caresse and 2:7, was amazing. Also, shout out to Callie Holger Thackeray. She obviously recently got married. I just know her as Callie Thackeray. I know her as Callie Thackeray because I used to run against her dad.
Oh, wow. Back in the day, Carl.
Hallamshire. I think Callie's run for Hallamshire as well. But she won a European bronze, didn't she, at the half marathon, I think it was.
Yeah, and she's got good range as well, Callie. Really quick over, really quick over 5K, good 10K all the way up to half and marathon. So intrigued to see how they all go. I think they're cracking teams. I think they're strong teams, and a big shout out to Phil, who managed to get himself in there. He missed that time in Valencia, if you remember, as Valencia 2023. Not long after, he goes to Seville in 2024. Great inspiration for our listeners here. If you don't get it the first time, don't give up on your dreams. Phil Sessamon does it in Seville and books himself onto that plane for the Olympics. What I would say about Phil, I used to compete against Phil, and he is just testament to hard work, dedication, and consistency. And if you could put those things together, he will be first to admit he's not the most talented.
Yes.
But he has figured a way out. So huge shout out to Phil for making that team.
Yeah.
Also on the road, then we've got Callum Wilkinson, who represents GB. A little bit on him in the race walk, the 20k race walk, Matt.
Yeah, well, just before I add my two-pound thing, is it something that you watch? I mean, I remember going to the Moscow World Championships 2013 and being fascinated. It was the first race walk I'd watched of any kind. Really found it fascinating. Are you a race walking fan? I know it's not quite our thing.
I guess when the Olympics isn't on, no, I'm not. I don't generally follow it.
You don't generally watch it, no.
But when the Olympics is on, you tend to follow everyone in a GB vest. So, your Tom Bosworth, who really brought it to light over the last few years. Yeah. I would always watch it then because we've got GB interest. That's the beauty of the Olympics, right? In the winter, you start watching curling and stuff like that. Things you'd never watch in general. But I'm sure when Callum is running, walking, hopefully not running because he'd be disqualified, but as he's walking and competing, I will be tuning in because it's a GB vest in there.
Yeah, and we both spoke a little bit earlier. I think it's important to have that kind of representation because Tom Bosworth has now retired, unless I'm mistaken. He was a bit of a public face of race walking up in Leeds and that. So I think it's important we have somebody there. And I remember my late father, God rest his soul, he always used to hark on about this guy, Ken Matthews, being Britain's last global walking champion, 1964. That must have been the Tokyo Olympics.
Wow.
It must have been. Well, again, Callum won a junior global title. So he has got global pedigree. I know we've talked about Max Bergen, and it doesn't always translate from junior to senior, as you well know. But this person has also competed in a previous Olympics 3 years ago and came 10th.
And it shows that again, probably the inspiration that's come from Tom Bosworth, who's really set the bar quite high, and then people being inspired to take up race walking. I was on an endurance weekend in Leeds this year with some of our marathon runners and endurance walkers, and there is more of an involvement now, and the sport do get behind those walkers. I know Tom is still heavily involved in the sport. I believe he's coaching and even doing, I believe, some agency stuff. Don't hold me to that, but he is still heavily involved, which is great to see. Also out there on the roads, technically, and in the lakes is the triathlon, which we're going to give a quick shout out to as well, because we always have a strong presence in the triathlon. We've had a relay medal in the past, relay gold, so we're current Olympic champions. Well, Alex Yee, who heads that up, is a Loughborough-based athlete here. Is a fantastic runner as well, by the way. He got himself a silver in the last Olympics, so he's going to be one of the favourites to stand out. Yeah. But also on the women's side, we've got a really strong team. And again, going in as one of the favourites, Beth Potter, who's a former athlete. She's been to the Olympics.
She's Charnwood way, was she?
She was based here in Loughborough. She's Scottish originally, but she was based in Loughborough. But the brilliant thing about Beth is she was making champs on the track, 10K, but she decided, if I'm going to medal, my real shot is triathlon. Yeah. So she goes in triathlon and she gets a shot this year.
I think it's a little bit of a shame because all of the media speculation around triathlon hasn't been around the athletes. It's been around the quality of the water in the River Seine, hasn't it?
I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
Well, you and I have done some open water swimming. What's your thoughts? Would you swim in the Seine?
Well, I think it's the controversy has come because there's been so many bad experiences for those athletes recently. Yeah. That it's not fair to expect them to swim in conditions that aren't right, just to say, well, we'll get the performance out on the day, but then they're going to be ill for the rest of the year, because people have competitions after the Olympics, and life does carry on. So putting them at risk is not right, in my opinion. They've got to get that right, and something's got to be done about it.
It was there in the boat race, wasn't it, earlier this year?
Yeah, exactly.
The big panic about E. coli and things like that.
And I think it's really important, if you're going to take people into these open water environments, it's got to be safe. Absolutely.
I'm worrying. Do you know why I'm worrying? I'm doing the Henley swim.
Oh, no.
On Saturday. So if you don't see me at New Levels for a month, you'll know why.
You've got
Ward 5, Burton Hospital.
You've got the dodgy belly. Yes. But yeah, shout out to all our triathletes who are out there. I know that, again, there was some selection controversies, particularly on the women's side, but a big well done to everybody who was selected. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole either, because we could be here all day talking about bad selection policies or good selection policies, and I feel for everybody involved. So yeah, just to let you know, we are thinking about if you're on the wrong side of that. Best of luck to those of you who were selected. It's not your fault that you were selected. I want to get that across. It's not your fault. So go out there, do your best. We will be in full support of everyone in a GB vest, but we'll also be in full support of everyone who's made the Olympics, providing they're not cheating.
Absolutely.
Because it's a great spectacle. It brings us a lot of joy. And over the next sort of 3 to 4 weeks, we are going to be glued to the television.
It is still the peak. I mean, the World Championships, the IAAF World Championships bring so much to the sport. But I think, just in the pit of your stomach, there is something still special about the Olympics. Let's be honest, it still is the thing that, I was nowhere near your level as a mere club runner, but, when you were growing up, it must have been the one thing that you think, well, that is the very top of the pyramid, isn't it?
It is, and I think it maybe has gone under the radar this summer a little bit with everything going on, particularly the football and England getting to the final, which has prolonged that summer of sport, and Wimbledon being on, and the cricket, and all sorts of sports going on. But just doing this podcast today has really kind of got my belly tingling again.
Excited,
it's like, it's coming up now. It's fast approaching. Really looking forward to it. Can't wait to tune in. And as you say, Matt, it is still the pinnacle. And I believe, maybe I'm a bit biased, I believe track and field is the pinnacle of the Olympic Games.
But if you're a genuine fan, you'd be wearing the right T-shirt.
You always come on point, don't you?
I do.
For those of you not watching on YouTube, Matt's sporting his Team GB athletics top here, Road to Paris 2024, so he's on point.
It's nice for me to wear some modern clothing rather than the retro 80s stuff.
Yes, it is. It is more of a modern, and it's a smart top as well, I'll give you that. But I'm on brand. You're very much on tune, ready for the Olympics. We'll go with that.
Great.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure, Lewis, as always.
As always, I've really enjoyed that. Like you say, Matt, it's got me quite excited, and hopefully it's got you all excited as well at home. Just going through this list has given us an idea on who to keep our eyes on, who to be cheering on. And if you're going to Paris, I'm sure you'll have an amazing time out there, because when I went to London, it is quite the spectacle, the Olympic Games. So have the best time. Enjoy it if you're watching from home. But one message is, tune in and get behind Team GB. Thanks for joining us again. Thanks to Matt for coming in. Really enjoyed it. Hope you've enjoyed it too. And as always, we'll see you all out there on the roads, the track, the trails, and we hope to see you all again very, very soon tuning into the podcast. Thanks, everyone.